Pinehurst, North Carolina. This is May 5th, 2020. I will call to order a special meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council to have a work session with respect to findings and discussion about the preliminary library needs assessment report. The meeting is now open. We received yesterday through the staff 3 documents and comments about a way to proceed this morning. I think everybody's had a chance to take a look at that, and I would like to follow very much the outline in the memo of April 30th from Natalie. For discussion purposes this morning, you've laid out 4 things that we should try to do, and given us 3 documents to look at, Natalie. And as you commented, this is quite a lot of material to review. We haven't had a lot of time to see it, but you didn't have a lot of time to prepare it. But I appreciate, and everybody does, the excellent work that's been put into work on this project and get us into this discussion in this special meeting today. So with those opening comments from me, Jeff Sanborn, is there anything else you would wish to add? And then I'd like to turn it over to Natalie to begin to guide this discussion, if that's all right.
That's surely okay.
All right. Any council members have any discussion on that? And otherwise, we'll turn it over to Natalie to begin. All right. Natalie, Thank you very much. And thanks to the other staff for being on the phone too.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm going to share the agenda item. This is the memo, John, that you just referenced. And what I did basically is, after your discussion on the 28th, I reflected, on your comments that you indicated in that meeting, as well as some additional email and telephone conversations that I've had with individual council members. And, my ultimate goal here is to really try to identify a potential way forward. Clearly, council was not satisfied with the preliminary report that was presented by our consultants. And my primary objective is to just get us to a point to where you are comfortable and supportive of how you think the village needs to move forward from here. So that's the key objective. I've listed those 4 objectives, as you mentioned, John, in the memo there on the screen, and reflecting back in terms of trying to understand maybe where the process broke down, or certain expectations of individual council members were not met, trying to really understand why that may have happened. And I do think that part of it is that there's some unclear language in the contract. I think maybe the consultants interpreted it one way, council interpreted it another. And so, I just wanted to start with that. And then secondly, I think to move forward, we just need to get some consensus from the council members on what that looks like, what that process forward looks like to you. And then, of course, in part of that process, we know we have the ETC survey that's still to be done. And then understanding, again, what that process forward looks like. So there's been a lot of dialogue, and I just want to, before I get started, say thank you to each council member for your input. I think it's been very valuable to me and helpful in trying to understand potential solutions or ways to move forward. So what I'd like to do is just, first of all, get council agreement that these are kind of 4 objectives in terms of moving forward. You may not get to all of these today, or you may decide that you want to address the first 2 and hold on to number 3 and save that for a later date, and that's perfectly fine. I think that this is an important topic, and I think council should take as much time as you need. So hopefully that's a helpful kind of preamble. So is that okay with council if we proceed in that fashion?
It's okay with me. Good. Go ahead.
Okay. Hearing none, I won't. So the next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to pull up the library IQ contract, and give me just a second here to do that. So I'm pulling that up. Can everyone see that on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to zoom in on it a little bit more. Is that better?
Yeah.
Sure.
So when I looked back at the contract, and when the consultant Debbie was pulling together the preliminary report, of course I referred to this because this is the agreement. This is what the council asked the consultant to do. And going back, it's review existing conditions. And I guess what I want to say is I recognize that all of our current council members did not participate in drafting this contract. So that's why another reason why I just want to go over real quick. We're not going to get into all the details, but it's really 4 key steps. So review the existing conditions and best practices. And the consultant did that. They looked at all of this. We provided information. As you know, Audrey was pivotal in giving us all that information, which is why she was, involved in making sure that the consultant had what they needed. Then we go to step 2, the solicit broad community input. So the community input process that was outlined in the work plan and task sections of the document right here, the last row of 2, was, as you very well know, personal interviews, input meetings, community conversations, and an online survey. And then it says they will compile and analyze all the data and information collected through step 1 and 2 to try to understand the need and demand for library services. They will identify and evaluate alternative strategies that are listed here: collaborating, expanding, combining services, meaning the village assume library operations, relocating to an existing facility, or constructing new facilities, etc. So I believe that they did do that evaluation. However, I feel that maybe there could have been a little bit more in-depth analysis of some of those other alternatives. And I think that's what I heard you, council members, say, is that possibly some strategies weren't evaluated enough, or there was not enough analysis or exploration of those alternatives. And I think that's kind of a key thing that I'm hearing so far. Okay. So then they said they would deliver their written report, once the ETC survey is delivered. And that's really outlined further down in the contract. And I'm scrolling down to that right now. Hopefully you can see that in the center of your screen. And so we've got the ETC survey still to go. So everything that really has been done so far is preliminary. It is not final because we have not done this survey yet. It is representative potentially of those who were involved in the process so far. While we did try to make sure that there was a diverse group of stakeholders and representatives, we used outreach methods to get those online surveys out there to people who don't use the library today. And I think, in fact, of the online survey, 36% of those who completed it don't use the library currently. But they will go in, and then the contract says it's conducted at conclusion of phase 3. Well, if you look at phase 3, phase 3 indicates that they will provide very specific recommendations. So phase 3 says, if expansions recommended, they'll recommend facility size, staffing. So we asked for something very, very specific in terms of recommendations at phase 3. So I think that might be where the conflict has occurred. But I do believe that can all be righted, and we can move past that. Okay. Are there any questions or comments about the contract? Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at it.
I don't know when to start, on
Okay. let me get through a little bit more, Kevin, if you don't mind, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think there was I think an expectation that of the alternatives provided, that they would be scaled, that there would be a smaller solution, a medium-sized solution, and maybe a larger solution. I think the approach that they took was to, if somebody wouldn't mind to mute their stuff, great. But they took the approach of saying, here's a recommendation of a range, and then here's alternative solutions within that range. So there, I think, is another area where maybe it wasn't quite clear, or council's expectations were differently, and they weren't explicitly stated. And I think, Kevin, you've mentioned a couple of times that, maybe the contract needed to be a little clearer. And, I think, unfortunately, what has happened to this point is that it wasn't clear. So the question is, what
The RFP wasn't clear, and I allowed it to occur because there was a lot of pressure on me, and we were going to fix it in the contract stage. And what happened is the flawed RFP was just kind of cleaned up in the contract, and that's what I think occurred.
Okay.
And I recall that in listening to the discussions that the previous council had on this, the different meetings, middle and when they were held, that there seemed to be a focus as that discussion went on to trying to get this report and this work by the consultant to be a real needs assessment. In other words, forgetting everything else that's going on and everything else that we have, what are the critical needs and desires of Pinehurst residents with respect to library services? So now, I reviewed the contract, and I see your points about all the things that are in it, Natalie, but I think the issue has become many other ideas that were included in this preliminary report, which seem to be conclusions or set a tone for the rest of the review that may or may not have suited either the prior council for sure, and this council absolutely. So I think those are the things that will be most discussed and contested today. How do we get to the point of being able to know we have an independent survey that's statistically valid, that's based on the preliminary work but takes advantage of the ETC program, to find out what are the key library services that Pinehurst residents want. And then from there, we as a council, you as a staff, along with the consultant, will figure out what size that ought to be, or well, first of all, what all those services that would be included, what kind of facility would need, where those facilities would be, and all these other things. And part of the issue, of course, is the kind of referral in the preliminary report to locations that might be possible, including, as we mentioned last week, private properties that have not really been in any large discussion. We already know from at least one landlord that that was not well received. So,
correct.
No, that is not what it was supposed to be. Is an unpoliticized facts document,
right?
And it turned into a hot mess of unorganized. The only organization came from our staff. Our staff was rock stars here. If the staff wasn't here, there would be no structure to this thing. There was absolutely no structure. It was just total, there was more structure at a Grateful Dead concert than the work by this consultant. I mean, this is the most lack of structure and lack fact-based document I've ever seen in my planet. And I'm a consultant and I produce these documents, and I'd be ashamed.
Well, to your point, John, I think that what happened is recommendations were made, and to Kevin's point, some of them could have been a lot better organized, I believe. Is that we put the ETC survey at the back end of phase 3 to test the solutions or the recommendations, when in fact we may have been better served to put the ETC survey in the middle of phase 3 before the recommendations and solutions were identified. And I think the other issue that I think I'm hearing is, at least to this point, there have been no constraints defined. So we said to the community, what do you want? Right? We'll figure out what it costs later. I think that now is the time for council to start talking about what are the constraints involved in terms of amount of funding and space and locations and those kinds of things. So I do think that that's kind of where we are now. And I've proposed, some ways forward, and I'm ready to move on to that if that's okay with council.
Yeah, and I think you mean we'll go over now the preliminary report and some corrections and changes to that, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
I think we all know that, issues were raised and things were done. Let's look at that report, see what needs to be fixed up, and then move on to other parts of this important discussion.
Yeah, and I'd just like to affirm that, the prior council, which Kevin and I were members, did review this contract and approve it last September.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that the report is a different issue, but I think, there are clearly, in hindsight, things we could have done differently.
Yeah, and I think that hindsight's always 20/20.
I'm taking responsibility for this mistake.
Likewise.
But it's a mistake. And I think what I held out is, I had a lot of issues with this. It's well documented. Okay. You could look at the meetings, but I felt, okay, everybody else is, I just felt like, maybe even despite all this, if we have an unbiased fact-based consultant working on this, we can get a good outcome. So when you don't have a organized consultant that really can provide focus and unbiased data collection, that's where, you have to have a perfect contract. You don't need a perfect contract all the time, but this is a case where the contract probably did hurt us, and I'm responsible for that. But I still say you have to have a consultant that's willing to freewheel with the facts. And look, we had a preliminary outcome before I met with her. She met with me before. She already had an outcome then. Then she announced pre-outcomes after those focus group meetings. Now we have more pre-outcomes. Every step of the way, there was predetermined outcomes. There was never a situation where there weren't predetermined outcomes. And there was always predetermined outcomes throughout this process. And there's very little facts. I still don't see very little facts on the ground, what the facts on the ground are. It's very little about the facts on the ground. First, you got to know where you are, and you got to know where you want to go, needs assessment. And then you got to figure out what to do. I think step 1 still has not been done. And I don't really understand how we could go to step 2 until we get step 1 done. So,
yeah, and Kevin, when you and I talked yesterday, and consistent with your discussion last week, it's where are the facts? I think that's what we're all looking for. So I think Natalie's got a way to draw us to that. So let's see if we can get into that.
Yep.
And that will get us on the right path to our decisions here. Go ahead.
Okay.
There's facts you could pull from this document. There's facts that aren't even in this document. There's facts that aren't even here. So even if we just correct the facts, we still have to add all the missing facts that are there.
Agreed. And I think if you don't mind, I'm going to share the screen. So what we need to do is identify what are those missing facts, Kevin? And I'm confident that we can do that. Can everybody see this screen?
Yes.
Yeah, this is your attachment number 2 from yesterday, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So as I mentioned, what I did is I tried to go back and identify what were the key sources of concern. Jeff and I talked about this as well. And I also talked to both Debbie Joy and Fred Belladin as well about kind of what what the key themes are in terms of your concern. And so I've identified here 3 of those, and the first, those are listed in the left. The first is the preliminary report had very definitive language in it and conclusions, and was not presented as really preliminary findings, as I've highlighted there. So that was one thing. And then, as Kevin just mentioned, there's some additional information that should be included in there. And all we need to do is identify what that is, and we can get that included. So what I've done here is I've put the suggested way to address your concerns on the right. And of course, changes to the preliminary report obviously can be made, but I think it's probably a little bit bigger than that. I think that at this point, council may be better served to kind of pull back the preliminary report, if you will, and just focus, to Kevin's point, on what are the facts. What did we hear from the community in terms of their needs for library services? Because at the end of the day, this is all about building a better community by meeting resident needs for those types of services. And so I think that is something that can easily be done. We can pull together, as you can see here in item number 2, we can consolidate things a little bit easier, make it easier to digest, make it easier to understand what the true key findings are, or initial findings as I've described here, and just group them into major categories. Other thing that I've identified here as it relates to the second source of concern is the analysis. So there was lots of comments from council and Kevin specifically. Where's the analysis that supports it? So I do believe that the consultant did their best to look at both the quantitative data and the qualitative data to develop their initial recommendations for what might need to be included in a library for our community. I know I did that analysis. I spent hours and hours looking at what did I hear across those multiple input methods. What did residents say on the survey? What did they say? What did households with children say versus, residents over the age of 55 say? What did users say versus non-users say? So I do think that the analysis occurred, but it was not documented in a way in the report that is easy to see or very clearly supported. And so what we can do at this point, I believe, is to come up with that summary of both quantitative and qualitative data. Now, I know that there's been some concerns about the qualitative data, meaning comments as opposed to survey questions or votes for quantitative. And council can weigh, how much validity they want to give to the qualitative data. But at this point, I think you're going to be better served to focus on the quantitative data that you have right now, and know that you will get additional quantitative data in the ETC survey, okay? The third area of concern listed here is one that I just mentioned, is that there was, I think, an expectation on your part that there might be a big, medium, or large, or excuse me, small, medium, or large solution, as opposed to one range, right? So I've identified a potential way forward here. Again, you can see focusing on the quantitative data that we've received so far. Council could then try to say, okay, based on that quantitative data, what are we hearing maybe a first, second, or third tier of service levels. And then use those first, second, and third tiers of service levels to quantify what that might mean in terms of the size of a facility. Okay. And so I've got some information there, and council can kind of talk through that. Okay. With that said, what you do now could change with the ETC survey. So today, the information obtained today might say preliminarily this is first, second, or third tier services, but you could get the ETC survey. It may be something that was a second might climb to a first, or something that was a second might climb to a third. Okay. Does that make sense?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything that we're doing right now is still preliminary. I mean, even the ETC survey and how you decide to word those questions, it's all still, preliminary until we get all of the data, all of the information, and analyze and correlate that to determine ultimately what council feels might be appropriate and appropriate at different ranges of levels of service. We're a village that offers a lot of services, and sometimes you can meet some need, but not all. So I think that's what I'm hearing council say.
Aren't you
Hey,
first?
Natalie, can I throw something in?
Yes, ma'am.
You and Judy and I over the weekend, Judy made a point that I really liked in the survey. She pulled out references to what all the input we've gotten so far. She pulled out references to that because having that influence, like she said, it's like leading the jury. When you have that in there, it might influence the person who's reading that survey to know and so I've liked the first, second, and third tier, but I thought we are basing that on what we heard in the initial public input.
Correct.
And I'm wondering if we just pull that out. And to me, the value of all that's been done with the input is we've seen the types of services that people want. So it seems to me just to put that out there and have it unbiased, and that way let the public then look at an unbiased list that hasn't been filtered through the public input so far, and then let them determine, because I liked the idea of 1, 2, and 3 until I thought about pulling out references to what we'd already received, because that could influence the ultimate outcome. That was just a thought I'm throwing out there.
You have some big decisions to make about how you want to move forward. This is just a recommendation to try to figure out how to wrap your arms around figuring out what are those, what needs to be the range of solutions being offered. Because I think that what I heard from council is that the current, 14 to 20,000 square feet is a little scary, maybe a little big. So, how do you figure out what a smaller range might be?
Well, let's say, for example, that through all of that public input so far, we've heard of 15 services that people want, and we just put all 15 out there, and then we let the statistically valid survey then show us what most of Pinehurst wants in a library.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a suggestion. Another thing I've been struggling with too, and I know this is a needs assessment, but I'm just trying to think through the difference between wants and needs. And when does a want become a need? I don't know. Okay, I'm done.
I think Kevin's trying to say something.
Yeah, I want to hear what Kevin has to say.
I'm just torn while we're working on this survey when we have an absolute, terrible needs assessment. Why don't we fix the needs assessment and the facts on the ground before we do the survey? Why are we working on the survey right now? I'm really concerned. Why don't we, fix a document that frankly has already been read by the public on the pilot and been given it to the public. Now you have to deal with the bias that these predetermined outcomes on 3 steps of this process have occurred. So I think we need to fix the present document and deal with it as truthfully and be as honest with the public what the facts are on the ground. I don't see anything to do with the present library budget. How can you have a discussion without basic facts in it? I don't understand how we're even leaping to an online survey right now when we don't even have basic facts on the ground in this document.
Kevin, you mean?
So I think I just heard Kevin say you want to see some additional information in there about their current budget and a little more about their scope of operation. Is that right?
I mean, that's just one example. I want to see more discussion on the Moore County. There was no discussion on Moore County. There's no discussion with North Carolina has a great North Carolina online program to integrate it with There's no discussion about anything, any facts that are pertinent to library services, to what we have now and how, I'm trying to get, we're trying to figure out what the present budget is, what the present square footage is in the library and the Tufts Archives and the basement and the bookstore. None of that. I thought that was elementary to any starting point, but it seems it was skipped over.
We can include.
Let me ask this question. Sorry. Well, I'm of a view that considering anything about building size, structure, location is really, in another phase, call it phase 2, phase 3, whatever, because until we know what are the basic services that residents want, and we receive that in a valid way, and then we start from that point to tie some numbers to that and figure out what we can afford from all the needs that are desired, that we really, to talk about budgets and square footage and all, we don't really need that at this point, it seems to me. We really ought to focus on what the needs are.
I thought we need to know the present conditions. I agree with you.
Okay.
The present conditions don't exist.
Yeah, there should be a baseline.
Well, that was my comment, and I see Kevin's comment on too, but Jane, did you have any thought on that particular point, or Lydia as well, and Judy? So let's start with Jane on that point.
I have some thoughts on it. I do not have confidence in the takeaways, the list of small conclusions, not their big solution conclusion of an enormous new library, but the list of takeaways and themes of what they think the people of Pinehurst want. Because if you go back and read through the focus group transcripts carefully, which is very difficult to do because your eyes do roll back in your head, so it takes a while. But if you do that, you see that the consultant was leading people along and saying, you got to think outside the box. Here's all these other different types of services that you might not usually think of in connection with a library. How about this wonderful possibility? How about that wonderful possibility? And people were all saying, yeah, well, that sounds kind of good. But then every time somebody said, well, but how much would it cost? The consultant said, oh, don't worry about the cost right now. And that, and brush that aside. So I'm not so sure that the list of takeaways saying, well, they want, a room for this and a room for that and a room for something else is really valid. Those were suggestions made, introduced by the consultant without the context of what it would cost or how it would really work, or whether we can crack that, not, with space at the community center or some other space in the village and so forth and so on. And as another example of that, in focus session number 3 on page 17, it was allowed as how that Given currently actually is in the process of qualifying for interlibrary lending. And that service, to have interlibrary lending, was indeed a big theme throughout the focus groups. People said, you don't even have interlibrary lending. If you had that, then you'd have access to a much bigger collection, even though you don't have all those books in-house. It's sort of like being able to collaborate with Southern Pines or the county library system or something like that. And once the Given signs up for that, that's going to change the landscape, I think, of the size of the collection that's available, which is one of the things people did genuinely say. They would like to have access to a bigger collection. Well, that issue is not anywhere in the report. The fact that the Given is in the process of doing that.
It's in there, and one
So,
hidden. It's
Well,
hidden.
Carry on,
just
Jane.
like
Carry
to-
on, Jane. Go ahead, Jane.
Everybody, I'd like to see almost a start over. I don't believe in the credibility of the takeaways that we have, because I think they were induced to a certain extent, and they were out of context, and they left out an awful lot. It's just much like what Lydia said, much like what Kevin's saying, and I think we have to get a better handle on the facts. The Given library, and I know I'm talking too long, but the Given library, and I'll shut up in a minute, but the Given library, what role are they going to play with us going forward? Are they going to turn the whole library operation over to us, and the village is going to operate and manage the library all by itself, and they go out of business? Or are they going to stay there, and we're just going to help them more than we have in the past, financially? And that all makes a difference too. So it's not even about we're not ready to pick which building or which shape of building. We're not even there yet. We, as Kevin said, have to assemble a much broader landscape of the facts, understand them better, and they need to be
Jane,
But I think that's kind of where we're headed. I think
yeah.
picking
Can
out
I?
those facts is exactly where Natalie thinks we can go now.
Yeah.
And I'll say this now, and I'll remind everybody about it as we go forward on this. Some of the questions and some of the all the decision making is going to come to the village council. So we're going to have the ability, I think, we will have the ability to make some choices. For example, just an example, and we'll get back to Natalie here. If we know that we have space in the community center that could provide some of the things that came out in this preliminary survey, that those who were speaking to that point in the survey were not aware of, because in fact, the community center just opened about the same time the survey got going. We'll know that we don't need to do some things in a new library facility or existing library facility because they're going to be done elsewhere. I think we'll be careful collectively as a council not to duplicate services that we could share from other library systems or space that we already have in the village. Those will be decisions that we make. But it would be incorrect, I think, to say just because somebody suggested that we need a teenage hangout space in the library, that's an incorrect response by whomever made it. It's just something that they had on their mind we could do, and maybe not aware that might happen in a community center, if not a library. So we're going to have a lot of filtering and decision making to do, I think, as we go along.
Yes.
And that's what the village council is supposed to do. I think where we are right now is we want to get the basic facts, what we did learn, what we can consider to be facts from the current work. I don't think we need to start over with the current work. I think we need to correct it to get to Kevin's point. And from there, we will then begin to sort out what the next step is to be, what we want the consultant to do, when to do the ETC survey when we get to the point of being prepared to make that a survey that's going to be representative and accurate. That's my view and what I've heard from all of you and heard from the survey over the past couple of weeks. Now, Natalie, would you want to continue then on the issue?
Yeah.
I want to come back to point 2 here in your matrix. What are the facts that we don't have that we want to put into this report, or what are the facts that we pulled out of it? Is that something you want to address right now?
Yeah, we can. And I'm, as you're talking, as I always do, I'm writing my notes over here to the side. So I think that would be helpful. I do want to, I do want to clarify something that Jane just indicated. I myself am not as knowledgeable about how the state library system works and interlibrary loans and state library resources. I'm not a librarian, but I think that my understanding is that, the Given Memorial Library is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization. So they are not a part of the state library system. Now, and I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to become a part of the state library system.
Right. They applied last summer. It takes a year for them to be evaluated. And then once they become really a public library in the eyes of the state, then all those interlibrary things can happen. And to Kevin's point and Jane's point, there just needs to be an appendix that says baseline on Given Memorial Library operation.
Okay.
What they're doing, including size and collection and all that stuff.
Okay.
That's definitely a missing piece of this.
No, it's page 18.
Yeah, and so
It's page 18 of the report. It says current Given Memorial Library operation. None of that information exists. None of that basic information that you should see in there exists. I mean, that's just one example where it's all opinion and outcomes. Even in the introduction, there was outcomes, which you should.
Okay.
And
That
I
can
agree
be
with Jane on the focus group. I watched 3 days of focus groups. I don't know anybody else that watched them all. Raise your hand.
I watched them all.
You did, Judy? Well, I saw people that agreed with the consultant getting their voices amplified and people that disagreed with her. I've seen one case where they got ganged up on, So I think she had the ability to amplify or de-amplify anything she wanted to. And I even saw some bias in there. I even saw some correction in there. I saw participants in the focus groups so confused with the lack of organization, they tried to insert organization into the focus groups. I even saw Natalie had to get in there once, and there was a positive interaction to correct things. There was just lack of structure. It wasn't that I don't like the outcomes, it's that I don't trust any of this as real data. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, I'm okay with learning things that I don't like in a survey. As a consultant, you must allow that to occur. That was not allowed to occur. If it didn't agree with it, I mean, they buried the lead a lot of times. There's high satisfaction with this library if you look at the numbers, and I'm really confused how much higher the satisfaction would be if the hours of operation were changed in the interbook lending. It'd probably be in the 80s, which is incredible. So I just think they buried the lead.
Okay, so if I can, go ahead, Lydia.
Oh, Kevin, do we not have enough out of all of that public input to go forward?
No, I don't.
And I think we do. I mean, I say that only because I look at the contract, ensure broad community input to determine the community's needs and size and realistic needs for improved or expanded services. And I agree with what John said. A lot of the decisions are decisions we're going to have to make. But I think we've gotten enough input from whether they were, and Kevin, I agree with you, they were unstructured, they were rambling, but I think enough rose to the surface that we can use going forward.
I don't agree with that, but I hear where you're coming from. I think I do agree that we don't want to relegate the decision of the public. We want to have a good, honest conversation. And what I think's occurred is this building has been built without a foundation of facts. And that's all. I'm very okay with talking about, I think there is a possibility of building a new library. I'm open to that. I'm open to the middle idea, and I'm open to figuring out how to make the operations work better as they are. I'm not open to doing anything. I'm just one council member. I think I want to solve this thing. I don't want to kick the can down the road, but I'm trying to figure out how to have an honest conversation with the public. And frankly, this document has honestly made it harder. It's made our job harder, not easier. And it was supposed to be easier.
May I make a suggestion? Let's figure out how
Please.
to make it easier. Let's figure out how to make it easier. Let's talk about, to Kevin's point, getting a document that summarizes the preliminary findings, so you know what information you have so far. And then once that's done, then move on to the next process.
You're going back to the matrix, step number 1, correct?
Yep. So if we go back to the matrix.
And how's that's going to happen? You want to talk about how that will happen? Right.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and have a conversation. Let's make sure we get a good list of well, let me ask this question. Is council supportive? Look at the second bullet here. Are you supportive of taking what we've received to date in terms of public engagement and creating a separate document that is just the preliminary findings, that does not include recommendations, that's just the preliminary findings of what we've heard so far, and focusing that on the quantitative data that has been obtained? And right now, I think the best quantitative data that we have is the online survey,
Yes.
the number of likes for different ideas that were reported at the public input meetings. That right now is the best quantitative data that you. So is council? So
You're in box number 2, bullet point number 2, correct, Natalie?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. How does council feel about stepping back and putting that?
Judy?
I think that it's the only objective options, if you will. I mean, the people it was an opt-in survey on the village survey, so while we can, know where people are from and age groups and stuff like that, it's not statistically valid as would be the ETC survey, but it is quantitative. The likes are really more qualitative,
A little bit more, yeah.
than they are, quantitative, but at least there's some accounting that you can derive from that.
Mm-hmm.
But really, those are really the main things that I think you can do. I mean, you could go through the the community conversations, and you could create maybe 3 buckets. This was a positive comment. This was a negative comment. This was a question people raised, and then try and, extrapolate that. But I'm not sure that's how much value.
It's worthwhile. Yeah. I will tell you, I sat through all 4 of those meetings, and, you guys have read the transcripts and understand kind of what was said. And, I think there is a way, despite how those conversations may have been facilitated, I think residents did express some clear views in those meetings, and it's information that I think is helpful to you.
But it's really anecdotal.
But it is anecdotal, that's correct. And it may or may not be representative of the broader community. It's representative for that one person who made the comment.
But the only way that would work is if you went through those focus groups and did an unbiased look at what was said, because we have this biased, they de-elevate things that she didn't agree with and elevate things she agreed with. I mean, it was very strange the way she introduced all the problems at the Givens Memorial Library, and she created the outcomes. And I'm just saying, I don't really understand how you're going to be able to extract good data from that. But she created the outcome she wanted. It was the strangest thing I ever saw. And plus, I could give a break on that. But when you load up, that I met with her, that was early on when I met with her, she already had predetermined, we already have a preliminary, we already know which way we're going to go. I tried to give her a box of all my materials. She didn't take it. She didn't even want my information. All this adds up, not that singular focus group issue. All this adds up to this is just one big cookie cutter thing we all could have done on going to library.com. And you could have figured out the one person per 1 square foot per person. I mean, there's nothing unique to our area. The one thing that I think occurred is I think she was upset that our community liked books and books were important to them. Yeah. And I think that was really pissed her off. And because she was selling all this other stuff. And I find that we're such a unique community. We're so special. And I wanted her to deal with the special needs of our community. And it became generic at some point. And I was so disappointed in that. I'm not concerned about what outcome occurs. I want it to be an honest outcome. I'm going to support an honest outcome.
Right.
I'm not going to lead the witness. I think the questionnaire, to go back to what Liddy says, does lead the witness. It's like building on this false house of cards. So that's why I want to stop it. Not to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to get back to, if we can just get back to an honest set of facts on the ground, which I haven't seen. There's things we all know that are public knowledge that aren't in this document. That seems weird, like the encumbered deed on the property. If it doesn't become a library, it resorts to the original owner. I mean, that should be known. That is a real issue.
The things like that, Kevin, I think, again, that's where the council's understanding and research is going to come in. I certainly think that's going to be a very important piece of information to know about and to deal with, and will affect some of the decisions we have. But I think there's enough qualitative and quantitative information to draw from and take some of it with a grain of salt, perhaps, based upon the way transcripts read that we've all looked at. Yeah. But I do think we can make some progress here in extracting that information, which I think is the point you're trying to make, Natalie, isn't it? That we have enough to extract information that will be relative to this and not biased.
I do. I'll give you an example. So during the community conversations, there was not one parent in those meetings who felt that their needs were being met. Whether, however the meeting was held or not held, it was very evident. It was very clear that our younger families, our younger residents want more, right? Yeah, it's anecdotal. And yes, it's just the parents that participated in those meetings. And so that's why you're going to do the ETC survey to see, is that a prevalent feeling among families and parents with children throughout the whole community. So I do think you have enough to move forward. I think if we can focus on identifying what is that path, that would be the most useful or the best use of our time. So with that, I think, John, if you don't mind, can I go back to that spreadsheet attachment, and let's make a list of everything that you feel is missing or additional information that you need. I think that would be helpful. Is that okay with council? Okay.
I think so.
Okay, so let's do that.
I don't know how to do that.
So let me, what I'll do is I'll start with what I've heard so far, okay? And if there's other things or other that you feel like you need, speak up and I'll add it to the list. So what I heard Kevin say is some information, more information about the existing library operations.
Can you type what you're writing down, Natalie? I think that'd be helpful.
Sure, I'll be happy to. You want me to open up a new document?
Or put it at the bottom of this or whatever, just some way that we all see what you're capturing.
Okay, sorry, I'll just go to the bottom.
Yep.
Happy to do that. I'm gonna let the whole world see my horrible typing skills.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you.
Misspelling's totally excused.
Yeah, exactly.
Worse, it could be mine. You know how bad mine is.
I'll do my very best. So I think what I heard is information about existing library services And I heard square footage allocated. I heard library budget,
And what percentage we pay of that budget, you know, which is,
VOPs.
I mean, that's
Contribution.
not in there. I mean, I don't
It
understand.
is. It's in there. It
Oh,
is.
but what we pay, but what percentage that is of the whole budget. It's not in
Correct.
there.
Got it.
Annual funding percentage. Okay.
Hours of operation.
Hours of operation, that's in there too, but we can consolidate all this into one spot.
Collection.
Somebody mentioned the deed, that if it's no longer a library, then it still can't be a library anymore. Is that in the deed?
I did pull up the deed and I chatted with our consultants about it, and I think they correctly admitted they're not attorneys, and so their recommendation was that if we get to the point, council gets to the point that you do decide to do something different, or that building is used, and of course, all of that is going to be a conversation that the council needs to have with the library board. That would be something we need to look at. So I'll put it on here for now, and we can figure out how to handle it. Anything else you can think
Footage of the library, the Tufts Archives, the basement, and the Givens bookstore.
I have all that information already pulled together for you, Kevin. We can include that.
Mhm.
The interlibrary lending program.
Yeah, just put the path to being a public library, and Audrey can give you the details on that.
Okay, yeah, because
And then I would also say, and I believe the intent, but we could certainly add this, is that the current library board will go away, but
That's not in there.
what is the transition plan?
That's not
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I have to say, as we're doing this, we're not just pulling out facts that we want to have in the report. We're pulling out information that we yet need to review further, like the deed and what the operations would look like into the future. I think that's okay, but some of those may be set aside for another discussion.
Okay.
As we
So
go
maybe-
along a bit. But this is good to get everybody's to brainstorm this a little bit. Very good.
So maybe we
Judy,
just
do you want to continue with that, Judy? Do you have any other thoughts you want to add to this list?
No, I mean, I think we need absolutely a good baseline on how the given Memorial Library sits today, what it does, how many patrons, all that jazz. And then that transition plan is really, what are possible options, and that isn't really necessarily a fact, if you will.
Yeah, okay. Let me
Yeah,
shift
we're
over
going-
to Jane, and if it's all right with you, Natalie, to have Jane give you any input that she would like on this
Yeah,
list.
absolutely.
Jane,
What are we asking me exactly?
you want to add to this list of facts you
For the
want to have
library?
pulled out or more information put into this report?
On the given in particular, the given existing setup?
What facts are missing from the report, from your
Well,
perspective?
are we just talking about Given's existing operations?
No.
Anything.
Oh.
Anything you want to be added.
Oh, man. I mean, I'd like to know more about how the other libraries in the community operate and the costs, their operating costs, and their staff sizes. I'd like to understand what the average library in North Carolina is, what the average library in Moore County is, to have perspective on all those different categories of library, and not just the 1 square foot per population density or something like that. I'd really like to craft, and I know this is a little bit different from what everybody else is talking about, but I'd like to see if we had a small project, such as renovating and making better the existing library space. What kinds of services could we include there, and what would it cost? Then, second of all, a medium-sized opportunity, a somewhat larger facility, or two facilities, one in a branch or something like that, but more square footage, not as big as a 17,000 square foot library, but something less than that, 8 or 9, something like that. What kinds of services could we include, and how much would that cost? And then we look at a larger one, and what does that offer in the terms of amenities and versus cost? I'd like to get a better handle on how all that shakes out.
I don't mind that information, but I'm not.
It's
I
not
think
at this point.
that's part of a
That's
stream
later.
of information we need to consider as we progress along. But let's get it written down here. That's fine. And whether it's part of this
Yeah, see to me,
summary
that
draft
sort
report,
of-
I'm not sure. Judy?
yeah, this is a bit predetermined as well. And I think that what we really need to say is, does the community want a library, number one? Okay, what are the essential services that they have to have, and how much are they willing to pay? And that arithmetic will lead us to how much money we've got available to put at this. And then this smaller, medium, and large will come into play at a later date once we assess that.
Yeah,
And
I
if
agree.
people don't want the library, we're done.
Well, wait a minute.
Now, let's move.
That is leading the witness. We've already determined that people want a library, and we're giving them money. And I think the issue is, how do we give them? We can't give them more money without the public buy-in. And we've kind of, it's getting weird. Public money going to a private library, but we're already funding the library. I mean, and it's a matter of, I just don't think, do you want a library or not? We have a library and we're funding it. And I don't know why we're not saying that. We have a library, we're funding it. And I think we're trying to figure out how we can do a better job in tune with the public, which is all these options.
So one of our constraints, I think, is that the money that we can give the library has to be for library services.
Right.
We can't pay for the HVAC. We can't.
Right. And that's I agree with that. Why is that clarity not? Well, why aren't we talking about that rather than this library? Nothing. We want to do the option is not nothing. The option is at our present level and do more. I personally think we got to do a lot more. But I'm just trying to figure out what the public thinks. But saying no, they don't want library. I mean, that's like saying, that's just not accurate,
Okay, so do they want to expand the library?
Yeah, that would be easier for me, because I feel like we're predetermining. That's kind of like a strange thing to say. We are very friendly and supportive of the library. Heck, we've even supported the bookstore, which is kind of weird. We've done nothing but support. Even gave them $1 million and now we're just trying to make another pass at it and do the right thing. And I feel like sometimes these questions look like doing nothing is an option. I don't think it is. It might be for a small amount of people. I think we all respect the fact that we should do something. Myself.
Well, let's see how the public reacts to all that. Now, Lydia, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any facts you want to pull out or have added here? You haven't been able to speak to that point if you wish to.
Oh, no, I was fine. It was, we were putting missing information that I thought was going into this preliminary findings or whatever, additional facts that people need to make a decision. And Jane brought up some great points, but I thought, wait a minute, we're going beyond where we need to be right now. And I look at the bullet number 4. Does the community want an expanded library? What are the services they need and how much are they willing to pay? That is basically the information we're looking for.
Yeah,
I think that is what the process needs to tell us. It's not something that's going to be found in this preliminary findings report.
No, it's not.
Right.
And Kevin, I understand your frustration, but to start all over again to me is not an option, because I do think we've got enough out of the public input to come up with a preliminary report that'll be beneficial to the people who look at this survey. And then the survey will be written in such a way that we will get statistically valid responses that will help us make decisions going forward with all of the other information we think we need.
All right.
Well,
Okay, Natalie, keep going.
Responses on predetermined outcomes aren't that helpful.
Okay.
Oh,
I think we're beyond that.
the predetermined outcome.
Yeah, I don't see a predetermined outcome here.
Okay, so
Natalie, go ahead, please. Natalie?
yeah, let's go over the missing information that everybody can see that on the screen, right?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think what we're looking for really is a lot more background and understanding of what the current operations baseline are. Now, there's a lot of this information that you've identified here is in the report. It's in one of the appendices.
Mhm.
So, like I said, I think it's just a matter of pulling it from different spots and putting it in one central spot for you. So, I think the consultants did make a good attempt to put stuff in buckets, but I think you want to see it organized a little differently, which is easily done. So,
I don't see the existing square footage of all the buildings in the document or the budget.
Right. I'm saying some of it. Patrons are in there, circulation rates, square footage is not, but like I said, I've already pulled all that together. We have all the library budget information. That's just a matter of including it.
Well, do you have that, or do you have the whole thing together? Do you have the carve out? Do you know where all the employees are? Sometimes in the library budget, they're including people beyond the library. Do you have all that really sorted out?
Natalie and I had this conversation. We have the overall budget. And Kevin and Judy, you're both aware that we went through a process in the library working group to try to have that basically cost accounted out. I don't know that we all necessarily trusted the result, and I don't know if it to that degree. And because of that, I'm not sure if we want to even include it in this report.
Well, I do. I mean, I've looked at the budget. I mean, the library's budget includes the library, the bookstore, and the archives. And our $150,000 contribution represents 20% of that overall budget. So we have all that information. But to Jeff's point, the cost breakdown between the different functions is not one that I think we're gonna be able to do. I think it's been attempted before. You might get close, but I don't know about that.
But and frankly, it's a rough order of magnitude.
And it's a rough,
because there's not many employees, and
correct.
And books are very clear versus museum pieces and
right.
Like so,
Right.
I mean,
You're funding library services, not the Tufts Archives and the bookstore. So I'm confused.
right.
So now I'm even more confused with what after you
Well,
saying this.
I think it's quite clear that the contribution of the village, 120, 150, what it's varied over time, can clearly be attributed to funding library services. I mean, I don't think there's any issue with that. Maybe I'm wrong, but so I understand the point of it. But I
What
think that we're
percentage
covered
are
in
we
that.
paying of library service? If you carve out library service, I don't know, is that half the budget for the library? Is that a third, or is what? That's what I was trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out real numbers that a consultant would produce. That's all I'm trying to do.
Well, let's see what Jeff and Natalie have to the greatest ability
Okay.
that they produced in the past, and that'll help guide us on that. And if we need more information going forward, we can get it. Natalie, go ahead.
Okay, so we can work on that. So the other thing that I heard you talk about, we've got hours of operation, we have collection size. We obviously have the deed, can get the deed. Again, it might require some attorney review. Path to public library, interlibrary loan possibilities are things that we can, as Judy mentioned, talk with Audrey about and get a good, clear understanding and document that in there as well. Anything else on bullet number 1?
Yeah, number 3 is big because what the consultant said is they went to Southern Pines, said they don't want to do, if we didn't do a library and just used you as services. I don't remember us telling them to do that, but I think we're trying to have more positive relationships, which is about how to work with everyone instead of saying, it was kind of like the way it was presented to us, it was either or. Well, we're thinking you could just provide library services for Pinehurst. That's what she said to Southern Pines. I'm embarrassed by that. I mean, I want to figure out how to work with Southern Pines to be better, to help everyone,
Yeah.
There was no communication with Moore County whatsoever. And even the college was kind of strange. They asked the college, well, can you do it for us? And they said, no. Well, we're trying to work with everyone, not have them do things for us. I didn't.
Yeah, Kevin,
I was shocked by that comment.
Well, Kevin, let me just say, I don't know that I was not personally involved in any of those individual interviews, of course. But my understanding, based on my conversations with Debbie, in terms of those three attempts to understand the willingness of other parties to collaborate and what opportunities there may be. In terms of Southern Pines, I think the key outcome of those conversations were that Southern Pines is their library is serving quite a number of Pinehurst residents, and they have their own capacity challenges, serving their own residents. And so I think Southern Pines was clearly open to collaborating with us.
Okay, I didn't hear that. I heard that we were asked them to do our job for us. That's what the consultant said.
It's quite, yeah.
I don't think
I don't know that it was as extreme as you're saying, Kevin, but they did. The indication was, because I asked that question, I think a couple of you did too, and the indication was that there was no desire to assist us. I didn't believe that on the spot, and I think if we had the right overture to any of those other library organizations, we'd probably find some spots of cooperation that we could do. So I'm not worried about that. I think we can.
You might have to repair those relationships if that communication happened the way she described.
I don't think that.
I don't think it happened that way,
No.
Kevin. I'm sorry if that's how you felt. Same thing with the community college. I think the community college was very willing to say, we're happy to support Pinehurst resident library needs, but they did not view it as a long-term solution. I think that was the outcome of that conversation.
I agree.
Yeah.
Isn't this subject, though, one of our points for later discussion? That is
Thank you, John.
cooperation with other library
Yes.
groups.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
we know we're going to want to do that. Now we got it on the board. Let's move on to the next point. Where are you in the
Okay.
matrix here, Natalie?
Sounds good. We will move on.
But John, to your point, what services do people want and how do we provide them? Whether we provide them ourselves, whether we work with Southern Pines, whether we work with Moore County,
Right.
those are our decisions to make once we figure out the kind of the expanded services that people want.
Agreed.
I feel like I'm just oversimplifying this, but
Oh, I like it.
Hey, the KISS method always works, right? It worked.
Right.
Is that right?
I'm a big advocate of it.
Jeff wouldn't understand that. He's military. He's got a different acronym for that. Probably. We wouldn't want to know what it is.
I think
they originated in the military.
yeah.
Probably with different words.
The lack of trying to create a custom solution for us resulted in this large square footage grab that eliminated a bunch of options, including how to use the existing buildings correctly. So that's what I'm concerned about, is when you start down a path where you're only happy with this large structure.
Kevin, I don't think
we're worried about that. So
yeah.
the decision on the square footage is going to be what we decide to do based upon all the input that we get. And I'm not worried about what anybody else is saying, even though I don't agree that it should have been said that way in the past. But Natalie, go ahead. What part of the matrix are we on here?
Okay, so right here, this is what I'm seeing in terms of the information, the baseline, our legal ability to I can't get that off. Ability to fund the library. What are the restrictions of our funding? Just some more baseline and background information, I think, is what I'm hearing you say. And then Jane said average library sizes in Moore County in the state. So just something to have some relative comparison of our baseline versus other in the community and state. And I think that's a good summary. So I think we can stop with this and move on to the other things. I can't get this research thing to stop coming up. I apologize.
All right.
Hey, Natalie, one thing, you got your Jane's average. One thing I saw in the contract, and I wasn't sure they addressed it, it said successful library services in communities with similar demographics. Have we seen this? Did they give us this?
I didn't see it.
Successful library services in communities with similar demographics. And I thought we talked in our last meeting about getting that kind of information because we didn't have it. And then I saw in the contract that was something they were supposed to give us, I think.
I will have to go take a look. Does he?
If you'll just take a look at it, because that might go to sort of to Jane's point. What are other communities with similar demographics doing?
And mostly, I think our cohort groups are more important than the average state.
Yeah.
So when you say cohort groups,
The Davidsons of the
You're-
world. Yeah.
Our
Or
comparative,
benchmarks?
the ones you already use as comparative sets, I thought.
Davidson and
okay.
Cornelius.
Cornelius.
Chapel Hill, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's too big.
yeah, those towns are too big.
25,000 kind of and under.
20, or yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having Microsoft Word problems right now. It keeps trying to pull up a research function and
Maybe just start a new document, cut and paste.
yeah, I think I'm going to have to do that. So just give me a second. It won't even let me do that. Ugh, what a mess.
You know how to do it. Just shut it down.
I did. I tried that too, and that didn't work. I am improvising. I'm trying. I am trying to here.
We're fine, Natalie. Take your time.
Okay. It is a technology issue. It won't even let me copy all of it.
Crazy.
I've never seen anything like it.
We use pencil and paper. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I hope we get some time to digest this and
You will.
not
You
rush
will.
down any path. I am going on vacation. I could be on the council call, but I just don't feel, because of my restaurant operations while she's working on all this and the stress I'm going through, that I'm a very good councilman right now. And I would like some time to really do my job, and I apologize for that. It just has to do with the chaos of trying to reopen a restaurant and do a bunch of stuff. And so I don't think, I was waiting on like this new, I thought John and I thought there might be a new document to look at. So I really am not as prepared as I'd like. Generally, I'm trying to tell you my thoughts, but I'd like to have time to give you more specific thoughts. I hope we don't try to charge down this path too quickly.
I don't recommend you do that, Kevin. I recommend you
I
take
need
the
some time because I'm
Take the time you need.
on Sunday. I
Right.
will still read the whole time I'm there. It's a great time to read, and I can get caught up. I'll be on the council call, but I'll be on vacation on the council call, a council meeting. And I just feel like, gosh, ready aim is a good time to ready aim before we fire.
That's understood, Kevin. No apologies necessary. Natalie, are you okay with the document right now, or do you need a little time?
So I am not okay with it, but if you can live with seeing the research frame on the right-hand side, I can make it work.
Absolutely.
How's
No
that?
big deal. No big deal.
We're just gonna have to deal with it. I can't figure out how to make it go away. So ignore all this stuff over here to the right, if you will. I think
Okay.
What's stuff to the right?
the research tab on the right.
I can't read it anyway.
Yeah.
Good.
Not
I
right.
can't
I'm
figure
using
out
my
how to.
PC.
I can't
Yeah.
figure out how to make it go away.
That's
So
why
I
I've got
think,
everybody's pictures.
yeah. Keep pictures over there.
It actually helps. I can read the whole document now.
Perfect. So let's, if you don't mind, move on to item number 2. I think that we have successfully made it through this first key concern right here. So the second thing is to look at the data that we've gotten so far and try to organize the, I think the list of 13 or 14 key takeaways into logical groupings. And so I took a stab at doing that. And I've given you a proposal here, which you see on your screen. Can everyone see that? The key, these key resident needs, coordination, library location. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're going to go, what we need now are what are the facts behind those, right?
Correct.
These
Correct.
are hypotheses.
These are correct. Correct. This is what the preliminary findings may have shown. So if we want to just right now,
I disagree with that preliminary findings. So
Okay.
I don't
Okay.
agree. I don't know where you got that. What facts indicated that?
So what I'm proposing we do, Kevin, so for example, I gave you the example of operating hours, okay, is that the information's in the appendices, but if you see what I've done here is basically what I want to do is I would like for council to agree on how you want this information consolidated and summarized so that we can then go through and do that for the report, and happy to do that. I want
the previous rush to judgments that are above this that I don't understand why they're in there. I mean, it
So
seems to be similar to what the consultants tried to do. The one above this, that that
right. So
that
Natalie, John, just to be clear,
represents for a library location. I don't understand. That is, where did you get that data? Where does that data exist?
So that's what I want to do for you. I want to put it in one place so you can see it and you can decide for yourself whether you agree or don't agree. So maybe based on what I'm hearing you say today and where I think you're going with the ETC survey, maybe right now we just forget about all of this stuff that's shaded and let's just focus on number one. So what have we heard? The primary objective. What have we heard so far that we think are rising to the surface of our public's needs for library services? So
Natalie, to your point there, why do we want to tell the survey recipients what came out of the preliminary findings?
I don't understand that.
She doesn't want to do
I'm
that.
not suggesting you do that, Lydia.
Okay, well, isn't this right here going to be posted on the website right now? The current needs assessment report is on the website. So I thought we were trying to modify that to put that on the website, but that's letting the user, the people who received the survey, find out what came out of the preliminary input. And I don't know if we want to affect.
You're assuming they would do that, Lydia.
Yeah,
Well,
I think they will.
Well,
We tell them in the survey is posted.
Well, and they read it in the paper. It was in the pilot. This, predetermined outcomes are already out there.
But
Well,
this it's just a real simple
Okay.
question. Do we want the recipients of that survey to know what came out of the preliminary input? It seemed like the preliminary input guides us in what we put in the survey, but I don't know if we need to give the public.
Well, here's the problem. In order for us to agree on that, it becomes public information.
Yeah, that's true. But do we want to link this report? The survey
No,
right
I
now
think-
takes
I
them
think-
to this
Well,
preliminary.
I think you're not anywhere near the survey right now. You're back at the preliminary report. The first part of it is going to be the facts. Now I think Natalie's saying this is the second part. What are the need for library services that we learned about so far?
Yes, I agree with that.
What have we learned so far? Correct. So this is,
or what do we think we learned?
or what do we think?
I
we
don't
learned?
know if we learned anything. There's some facts in your survey that I think are facts. I think those are facts. So, but I don't remember, some of this stuff is not in a factual part of this.
Well, it's in the.
So let me, if I may.
Kevin, there's lots of facts that
There
are
are.
available from the online survey and from
Correct.
the other input that support these potential
What other input?
findings.
Other input.
So here's an example.
So for example, this is the example that I'm showing, for example. So library hours may limit utilization for working patrons and household with children. That was a finding based on these 4 bullet points, okay? A review of the current operating hours. So they are not open after 5 o'clock, Monday through Friday. So if you're a working patron, you cannot go to the library in the evening, and they're open from 9:30 to 12 on Saturdays and not on Sundays. So for those patrons who work, they have a, couple hour window on a Saturday, okay? Would be supporting information number 1. Supporting information number 2, or a finding that current operating hours may limit utilization, is that 29% of the respondents in the online survey who are non-users that represent household with children indicated the limited operating hours as a top reason for not using the library. Okay,
Right.
So there's 2 data points. In addition, at the public input meetings, one resident said that they put their idea on the wall that said the operating hours needed to be expanded. And 10 other people supported that idea. So there were, 11 votes for increasing operating hours at the public input meeting. Then in addition, and finally, during the community conversations, there was one attorney, for example, who said, I work in Durham. I want to go to the library at night and I can't because it's closed by the time I get home. There were parents that said, we go to Carthage because we can't go in the morning. We go in the afternoon to the library.
I don't think these are controversial. I think they're blinding glimpses of the obvious, like the interlibrary lending issue.
Mm-hmm.
Hours, those are the 2 major issues, and I agree with that.
Okay, so this is my proposal, is for us to go through, and this is where I was saying the analysis was done. It just wasn't documented like this so you could see it all in one place.
Yeah.
Why?
So he's talking about how to present the analysis.
Correct.
He's
How
not
to
saying this final analysis.
Right.
Right. It's just
Lay it
saying,
out.
Yeah. So based on what we've heard so far from the different input methods that we use, this is what we think that information is telling us.
This is what substantiates it.
It substantiates it. Yeah. So is that type of a format acceptable to the council?
I think it's much better.
So any information that came out that goes against that proposition or alternative to that proposition for each of these propositions?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
To the extent that there's countering evidence, we should probably include that as well.
Yeah, pros and cons of anecdotal would probably be the way.
Yeah,
Excellent idea.
Yeah, that might give it the balance that I need because, I don't think it will have. I think this is an example of there not going to be much countering against it, but other items there will be. And there was an assumption to amplify things higher and de-amplify things that I think can still slight this factual data. So I'm worried still.
Well, I get it. For example, people complained, they said there's not enough books or whatever, or children's programs or whatever it was in Pinehurst, but they didn't want to go to Southern Pines because it involves paying $60 a year. Well, it's going to involve at least
$60 a year.
That's good.
So
there's no free book.
People have to understand if they want to have all these wonderful programs, they're going to pay for them one way or another.
But isn't that a council decision? Isn't that a council?
Ultimately, yes, that's going to be a decision we'll have to make.
Yeah, we can't relegate our decision-making to these surveys. We have to still make educated decisions based on all the facts we know. But I just still want some honest, structured decision without the bias of the with some.
All right, Kevin, we are talking about amending this report, right?
I don't know why. I think it's not useful. I think it's.
Well, we're not even, Natalie's nodding, you're saying no. I thought we were trying to rewrite this report, and if that's the case, what's the purpose in rewriting this report?
So that we can aggregate the facts and substantiate some of the claims that were made in here or deny them,
Yeah. I like that, Judy. I think that's fair. I feel like there's been I use the term, I just don't feel this is an honest assessment. I just want some honest assessment, even if I disagree with it. If it's some honest way we got there, I think I'm okay with it. I just don't.
I'm just trying to figure out the purpose, and I'm holding up this paper. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm just trying to figure out, we're trying to rewrite this report, but for what purpose? To show
no purpose. That's the thing. Instead of having an agenda like our consultant had, we don't have an agenda. We want the facts, and that's all we want. I think that is the problem, having a purpose. And that is what happened here. There was a purpose.
Can I respond to that, Lydia?
Yes, please.
If you will. So I think you do have some options here. You have a choice. So we can go back to all the information that we've got, and we can reorganize it and summarize it, just like I showed you just now as an example for operating hours. Or I think maybe what I hear you suggesting, Lydia, is what value is there in doing that? Why don't we just put the survey out there and ask our people what they think and get the data? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I think it's important to have what we're calling it preliminary findings, but even as I go through it, I find where they have reached some conclusions, like their description of the given library is full of their conclusions for why that library is not useful or not, it doesn't serve a purpose anymore. And I think that's getting too far into conclusions they've reached based on just on limited input. So I would love for this to just be a document that just shows the preliminary findings, period, and add all the additional facts, and strip out all of the conclusions that have been reached throughout the entire document.
Okay.
I mean, if we're gonna amend that, that's what it really needs to be, and that means going through it and pulling out all of the conclusions, but also adding, like Kevin says, add some facts.
Okay.
It should just be no.
I think that's what we're suggesting.
That is what we're suggesting.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
Okay. Well, I just want to clarify that and
look at things that, with different raking lights, so that it flushes more things to the surface.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what I'm hearing is maybe we stop here.
Yeah.
And maybe we take a stab and figure out how to organize that, how to do it, how to create a separate document. It's just those summaries with no conclusions formed, no recommendations presented, and just give you a document that has, here's what we heard.
Wow.
Don't call them findings. They're not findings. Just call them, I don't know,
results.
Information or something.
Results
or summary of public input, or a summary of public input to date. And listen, Natalie, I'll come over and I'll come sit down with you. That'll help.
Let's write it, and then a title will emerge.
Yeah.
A title will emerge.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I trust the staff. I trust my fellow council members. I would say this. The reason I want to dramatize the fact that we have no purpose when we do this is because that is exactly what we don't want to do. The same thing the consultant did, is have a purpose. We want to just be a curator of the facts. And that's why, everybody, it's a public meeting, everybody's saying, well, maybe we don't like this report because we don't like its findings. That's not the case for me. I don't see anything usable fact, and I just want to. I think the only way we could change a report coming back from the consultant is not have a purpose in mind, just clearly have a rally all the facts we know, even the facts prior to this. Consultant.
Okay.
This is a real fact-based document. I think that's the only way forward, because otherwise we're going to be accused of, changing it because we didn't like the outcome. That is not the case here. We're trying to be honest with the facts and try to get on the right foot on this thing.
Mhm.
I think we got to reset. And I think if we do it that way and don't have a purpose in mind, if the facts lead to building a large library, I'm okay with it. If the facts lead to not, I'm okay with that. It's not trying to lead the witness. That's really what I'm trying not to do.
Okay.
We clearly do have a purpose, though. Our purpose is to understand what expanded services our community might want and what they're willing to pay for it.
Right, we don't have a foregone conclusion.
That's right.
That's right.
I think that's what
that.
Natalie's leading it.
I'm okay with that.
Yep, I agree.
Natalie, do you have any other comments on things you want to hear from us?
I do have one thing that has come to mind. What generated the council's initial $1 million contribution to support a capital expansion at the library? There's also not discussion of that in this report so far as background information. I think it may be useful, especially for those council members who may not have seen that documentation or understand where that came from. Some of you, have a little bit more knowledge of that than others. So I do have some information that I think we can share with you about that, and it might be appropriate to put some of that in there as because
That's helpful.
it had some information about estimated collection size, and Stagger and Chow, I think, did a pretty nice job of trying to lead the board through that at the time, just to understand some things.
Background.
It's just background. It's just background.
Yeah, I think that's good. Opening it up for all good information.
Right.
And
it's just background.
Yeah. I don't, as long as it's good, solid, trackable information, I'd love to see.
Okay.
Judy, are you okay with that? I am. Do you have any point of view on that?
Me?
Especially from the working group to Judy.
No, I think we're looking to get a baseline set of facts about the library itself, and then a baseline of the facts with substantiation that have come forth so far from the survey and the public input meetings.
Yep. Okay.
All
right.
Natalie, we're giving enough clarity here.
You've given me exactly what I need.
I don't believe.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Which is more work.
That's
right.
Now,
I hate that part.
Natalie, you suggested
Takes note. Natalie needs
maybe
more work.
We're at the end of the end of this first discussion. Was that your intention? And maybe this is enough discussion for today. We need to decide how to proceed. Jeff Sanborn, how do you feel about that? Too. Is this enough discussion for today, Jeff?
I think we're in a good place. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Council members are comfortable with that. We'll terminate the meeting here shortly with a plan that we'll now discuss about when should we next meet, whether that's next Tuesday or sometime before, whatever Natalie and Jeff feel they can provide. Is there any preliminary thought from your mind, Natalie or Jeff, about next step to meet on this and the timing for that, really?
I don't think we should plan on tackling this again until at least next Tuesday.
Yeah, I agree.
I would say maybe even the following Tuesday.
Kevin, when are you on vacation?
Well,
I'm on vacation next week. I was supposed to go to Ireland when this thing hit, and I'll be honest, I'm going to be much easier to get along with when I get back. I'm at the end of my road. I apologize to anyone that had to read my misspelled emails, and I think you guys need me to do this more than I do. But I'll be leaving on Sunday.
With all due respect, I think we would at least expect next Tuesday, assuming that Jeff and Natalie agree, that
An update.
we would have another format for this and see where it is. I really think that's important. I'm not trying to rush anything along, but that's a week from today. And I think we already have a council meeting set. We can take advantage of that meeting or a work session to discuss that without.
But honestly, in order for, to put that on the agenda for Tuesday, for us to really collaborate on, we need to have that document Thursday night. I don't see how Natalie can get that done by Thursday
I think
night.
it's unfair.
Well, that's a good point, Judy.
Unfair.
That's a good point.
Natalie's saying she can't.
I cannot. I cannot. But what I can do,
You might be able to share an outline or something like that.
Yeah.
that's exactly what I want to do. I want to just try to, between now and then, I want to kind of put an outline together, show you how it might be organized. And I think that's something that I can do. If I don't have it by Thursday, I'll certainly have it in time before your meeting. So
That's understood.
yeah, my suggestion would be for you to schedule a work session for this topic. And we will have an update, and it just depends on how much time I have in terms of our ability to have that, more fleshed out versus less fleshed out. Does that
Okay.
make to council? Okay.
Well, then what I'm hearing is that if possible, there may be an outline or some document from what we've discussed today, possibly available for next Tuesday, but we will work to it later time, accepting a recommendation from Jeff and you as to how to schedule that.
Okay.
Is that fair, Council?
Yeah.
I'm
what's
seeing
our-
nodding heads, so I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's
All
our
right.
lead time to set another special meeting?
48 hours.
Yeah.
So on Tuesday next week, if we thought we had something, we can meet the end of next week. Or the
Okay.
following
I'm a little concerned on
And
putting a
okay.
backstop on this. I'd rather, with all this consultant misstep, I don't think we could afford to move too quickly on this. So why can't we just talk on Tuesday about it and see if, I think we might need
Here we are.
a month. We might need a
That's the
month.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Step by step.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Well, can I say thank you, everyone? I really do appreciate all the input and the extra work. No, I'm kidding. I do appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
Okay, you guys.
And I think it's an important topic, and I know that each of you have devoted a significant amount of time to this topic, and I know that you're all committed to doing what's best for the community. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah,
Now,
thanks, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you. Point of order, Beth Dunn has popped up there on my screen here. Is there anything the village clerk needs to be advised about? I think we haven't set any special meetings yet, so you don't need to worry about that. We're just looking for next Tuesday. All right, Beth, thank you. I don't believe we had any other business to discuss today. So with that, I'll call for a motion to close the work session, please.
I move to adjourn the work session.
Is there a second?
I second that.
I have a motion from Judy Davis and a second from Kevin Drum to close the work session of May 5th, 2020. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much for your